You're listening to Shift, Human First Financial Guidance with Ross Marino.
Today, we are shifting the conversation with Doug Lennox, co-founder of Think to Perform. Hello, Doug.
Hey Ross, how are you?
I am good. It's great to have you on the show. I know you have been working in this field for a long time. Certainly one of the pioneers. Maybe not everybody out there knows who you are and knows about Think to Perform. So how about you take the first minute and talk about your journey to where you got to today?
Well, interestingly enough, now that you mention it, I actually started officially my journey in this space 50 years ago. So, in the world of Pinocchio, I became a real boy in March of 1974 is when I officially became what was then called a registered representative. And I was an advisor, um, starting to understand where the game was. I started to experience myself. I was only 21 years old, and I was experiencing for me the role emotions were playing in my career, and and then I began to realize that was true for everybody else in the business. And then I realized, well, that must even be true for our clients. So very early on, I was starting to see the possibilities of playing around with this concept of emotional competence and its application in the financial advice proposition. So it's kind of an early start. I don't know why, but largely experiential.
Yeah, I can also point back to age 21 as starting and had a business card saying registered representative, which sounds much better than stockbroker who was smiling and dialing. So I'm going with registered representative as my start as well.
That's right. Well, and I quickly was moved into, I think, a zone manager, whatever that was.
Right.
So a zone manager as a retro, I thought, wow, that's got to be good. So, but yeah, that's terrific. We have the similar roots, roots and wings, they call it.
That's it. And we're still kicking, so it's good. Now I,
Yeah,
I
here
have
we
seen that.
are.
Yeah, one of your favorite sayings always caught my attention, and it's investments work, but investors don't. What do you
Yeah.
mean by that?
Well, and it really relates to what I was just talking about with regard to emotions. The interesting thing, and related to that, I asked the question, why do otherwise smart people do dumb things with their money? Why do investments work better than investors? And the answer to that question, quite truthfully and very straightforward, is investments don't have emotions and investors do. And so what happens is emotions play a role in investment decision making. Emotions play a role in virtually everything. So if you think about and when I and others started Think to Perform 22 years ago, I did that with the eye on the question, why do people do what they do? Broad question. And then when I get into it and think about it in financial services, it's why do people do what they do with their money? And then the second question that inspired the founding of the company was, is it possible that one could really be who they would ideally like to be more often? Like, could I be a better decision maker with money? And the answer is yes. And we have to get back to why do people do what they do? And it starts with we are wired. Our brains are wired for us to survive. The wiring is actually triggered by emotions as stimulated from some outside event. So if something happens outside of us, what will happen is that some event happens, an explosion goes off. In fact, I'm thinking as I said that of a video of the Atlanta Olympics, and when the explosion went off, what actually visually happened to all the people who were there. And it was a visual demonstration of emotional intelligence. So when our reality is stimulated from the outside, it stimulates us emotionally first. Emotions are our first survival instinct. So we're wired to survive. The wiring is triggered by the emotions. So if I feel, well, I'll ask you, name an emotion that if I felt it could suggest there's danger out there. If I felt what?
Fear,
Fear.
right?
Perfect one. So if I felt fear, in fact, let's use that one. This is a beautiful one, especially for investors, because here's the deal with fear. I'm going to talk about emotional intelligence real briefly. Emotional intelligence is real, number one. Number two, it is not cognitive. We're talking about it, so it sounds like it must be, but it's not. Number three, it sacrifices accuracy for speed. It's really fast and it's frequently wrong, but it's really fast because it's trying to help us survive. So, and I'll add this because it's fun for investors. When it comes to money, our emotional intelligence cannot tell the difference between a bear market and a bear in the woods. Both bears will stimulate the emotion fear. Now, what happens? So if you could think of our experience as a triangle, so think of that triangle being a circle of thought, and then a circle of emotions, and then a physical circle, my action circle. When my triangle is stimulated from the outside, it stimulates me emotionally first. And it's really fast. Our emotional intelligence gets activated in 12 milliseconds. 12 milliseconds is faster than I can say I mean, I can't even say the T to get to 12 milliseconds. That's how fast it is. And if whatever happened scared me, what will happen is my body will send involuntary message. So what will happen is cortisol chemicals uh, are secreted biologically designed to restrict thought. So if you think of that cognitive circle as the sun and think of the emotion circle as the moon, we experience a partial eclipse. If you've ever heard someone say, I was so scared I couldn't think straight, or I was so angry I couldn't think straight, or I was so freaking excited I lost it. I was so excited. That's where Greenspan came up with irrational exuberance. The emotion was exuberance, the behavior was irrational. And that's because of the eclipse. When the brain is heightened in its emotional state, either with exuberance or with fear, either extreme, we'll get a partial eclipse and we can't think straight. That's why the casinos work. And that's why investors work less well than investments, because the investor will fear fear. An irrational response to meeting a bear in the woods is to run. An irrational response meeting a bear market is to run. And what many people will do is run from the bear and lose either their lives or their money, depending on circumstance. That's the deal. That was a long, babbly answer, but I had fun doing it.
Well, it just highlights the struggle. It's part of it. And, I've had this coffee mug for quite a while that says,
Think, feel,
"Will
do.
do." Yep.
That's it. The
Yeah.
think, feel, do. That's it.
Yeah. That's what we're always trying to figure out how to work how those work together, how they interact and so forth. I do love the bear market and the bear in the woods and the similarities there. It's just a great picture. And yes,
Well,
running from both of them could be catastrophic, right?
absolutely. And the other thing, Ross, and this is now where think of the double triangle now, because if we remember that whenever a human is stimulated from the outside, it'll be an emotional experience first. The cognitive part of the brain gets the message, if not interrupted, but it'll be interrupted depending on the emotional state. But the cognitive part of the brain gets the message in 40 milliseconds, which is still really fast, but it's 3.5 times slower than 12. So when the advisor is interacting with the client, these are the questions the advisor should ask themselves. Because remember, what you as the advisor say, how you say what you say, the look on your face, everything you do is going to stimulate your client emotionally first. That's the way it works for all human beings, including the clueless. So you don't have to know this for it to be true. You can be clueless and it's still true. So a lot of people say, well, that's not true for me. No, it is. And you're clueless, and that's okay, but it's still true. That's just the way it is. So if I know that, I'm going to talk to your audience. So I know I'm talking to your audience. And here's what I'm saying to myself. I'm going to get to talk to Ross shortly. And while I'm in your waiting room for you to pull me in, here's what goes through my head. I get a chance to talk to Ross's audience. How do I want them to feel? What do I want them to think? What do I want them to do? Think, feel, do. And since they're going to be stimulated by me emotionally first, what do I have to do to increase the probability of them experiencing what I want? So my behavior is going to stimulate you emotionally first. So when you go home tonight, if you live with somebody, do you live with somebody?
I do.
Yeah, and if you go home tonight and you walk in, your immediate presence will create an immediate, instantaneous emotional registration. How that's responded to, we don't know. But most people, I ask people all the time, we're all high achievers. We've all had bad days. And I'll say, how many of us have had a bad day and we've gone home and we find our household inappropriately upbeat? We get, I've had a bad day. These people are too happy. What do? Well, I glare at them. I slam the door. There's all kinds of things I can do to ruin a good day for somebody else. But I wouldn't do that intentionally. And similarly, advisors can do that before every interaction. Ask yourself, how do I want my client to feel after talking with me? What do I want them to think? And what, if anything, do I want them to do? And what do I have to do to increase the odds of that happening, regardless of how I feel? So I'm going to perform well, regardless of how I feel. Why? Because I know it's going to influence you. I have an obligation to you.
Well, I've certainly seen the shift over the last few years towards human first and much more talk about behavioral finance. I remember 10 years ago, there might be one session at a conference on BFI or behavioral finance. Now there are keynotes at all types of conferences, or our conference Shift is all about it. You have a conference all about it. So we're seeing it more and more. So do you think that the industry is finally coming of age, or is this just kind of a passing fad that geeks like me think, oh, this is cool, I want to do this? I mean, what do you think's really going on?
I think it's it's here. I think some of the industry is going to have too hard of a time to change because a long time ago, when the industry was started, people were realizing, those that were starting the industry, that people needed some help making financially intelligent decisions. And then that grew into products and selling products and stuff. And we sometimes have lost sight of why we're here. We're here to actually help people make smart, responsible, values-based decisions with their money and their lives. That's what we're here to do. And it's not a fad. The human part of this is here to stay. And in fact, I would say what's happened in the 50 years I've been associated with it is, I think the tilt has moved away from, it's always been a two-sided coin in that on one side, it's always been technical and fundamental, and then the other side has always been behavioral. But the emphasis for most of the last 50 years has been on the technical fundamental. I think it's not been appropriate, but it's been there because people have, it's been too hard for us to accept some of the truths about human behavior. And so the financial services industry has complicated things unnecessarily. You know, and I would like us to get better at simplifying things. That's what the consumer is interested in. They want transparency and simplicity from an industry known for neither one. And so there is this major shift, and I'm excited that you guys even say it, shift. We're shifting and we're evolving. That's what we call it. And it could be like a revolution. This is a big deal. And for advisors who don't get it, they're going to be left behind because the pricing model isn't correct in today's world. What people really need is help making smart, responsible, values-based decisions. And so the game is going to be people first, no question about it in my mind. You know, and it's interesting, our company, we're members of this consortium for research on emotional intelligence in organizations, ridiculously long name, but it was named by the academics who created it. But they did a research project that Ameriprise, now called Ameriprise, sponsored, was a major project. Here was the question: what are the competencies of an advisor that result in a superior experience and portfolio return for the client? It was the only study of its kind ever done, because the hypothesis had been, if Ross and Doug are making money, and if the companies they represent are making money, then their clients must be doing well. Turns out that's not true. It turns out that there are people making money who aren't doing that well for their clients. You know, and it's not just Bernie Madoff. There's others, you know, like that. And so what's interesting is the research came back and said the competencies that matter most are emotional and moral. In fact, the top two competencies are moral. And the number one competency is behavioral integrity with the client and the willingness to walk away from a client doing something stupid rather than doing it and hide behind the client wanted me to do it. You can't do it. Integrity is the game. The human part is the game. R2-D2, I'm sitting here talking to a microphone that looks like R2-D2. And R2-D2 is cute, and R2-D2 is funny, but R2-D2 is a machine. Those aren't real emotions. He's just programmed to be funny. You know, he's programmed to be whatever program he was given by whatever moral code. So I'm big into this is here to stay. In fact, I would say, you know, you're looking at right now, one of the leaders, I don't know if I appropriately can name names, but the head of the company that has the most CFPs in the industry and the most BFAs in the industry says the only designation that everybody on an advisor team needs is the BFA. Everybody needs to know how to relate to the client and know how to relate to each other. It's a behavioral game. The reason investments work better than investors is investors don't behave. The reason they don't behave is they don't know how to manage the emotions. And that's not their fault. They need a human advisor to help them with that.
How about we talk quickly about the BFA and the designation? I certainly see it all over the place. It's widespread, but really compared to the industry, it just scratching the surface.
It's just now coming up. Exactly right. It's grow. You know, what do they say, Ross? Beauty is a low base. You can, it's easier to grow fast if you got a low base. But But the BFA actually was originally recognized by FINRA back in, I want to say 2007, 2008, right around there, just before the markets went right in the toilet. And the timing was good. Recognized just simply means, they recognize that it's real. A number of organizations have used it. It basically says it's designed to provide practical application of behavioral science in the world of financial advice. And it essentially deals with the things that you said at the outset, Ross. I appreciate you mentioning it, that investments work, investors don't. And we answer those questions. So what happens is in behavioral, and by the way, the BFA course, for those who are CFPs, you do get 20.5 credits, CFP credits. I know a lot of us, myself included, I just finished my last CFP exam for my continuing ed the other day. So I beat the deadline by several days. That's pretty good. But BFA basically allows for us, and you don't, by the way, have to practice in the industry to actually take the course and receive the marks. Not all companies have approved the mark, so depending on what organization you're with, most RIAs have, a lot of the BDs have. So I think pretty much everybody in your space, people can use the BFA, and most, the bigger BDs like LPL, Ameriprise, Prudential, those guys have all approved the designation. So it's that. It happens to be, in the bucket of shameless self-promotion, I hope one of the more significant contributions that I get to participate in having made to the industry. We really know for a fact that if the advisor incorporates the behavioral competencies, and the competencies that matter most are emotional and moral, and the program is designed to help develop the differentiating competencies. Cognitive and technical competencies are necessary. They're table stakes. You won't get by in the future on being a money manager. You'll get by in the future at being a behavioral coach. That's where the future is. And it's inevitable. That's what I would say.
I agree with you. I appreciate all you've done over the last 50 years. I love the work that Think to Perform is doing. For anyone out there who wants to learn more about the BFA, go to thinktoperform.com, and that's the number 2, Think to Perform. Highly encourage people to check it out. I agree with you that the human side is where we have to have the emphasis going forward. The technical, a lot of that's getting taken care of by software and different things that we can leverage, right?
And it's much faster than we are. And better, and better, more accurate. One last thing that I would say, that this is kind of fun for all of your viewers and listeners. If you Google values exercise right now, the number one, and we paid nothing for this to happen. I don't know why it happened, but the concept of values is grabbing the world. When people do values exercise Google or values card exercise Google, Think to Perform is the number one thing that shows up in the world. We're just a diddly little company in Minneapolis. But the concept of making values-based decisions with money and life is here to stay. And financial advisors are leading the parade. This is a wonderful opportunity for all of you.
I agree. Doug Lennox, thanks so much for being on the show and shifting the conversation with us today.
Thank you, Ross.
Thank you for listening to Shift with Ross Marino. Please visit humanfirst.live to learn more. This show is for general information purposes only and is not intended to provide recommendations or advice. Speak with a legal, tax, or financial advisor before making any decisions. Past performance references are historical and do not guarantee future results.